Hello all, welcome to System Thinking series. Today we will be looking into path to production and the possibility of automation. This would give an overview of mobile development infra. Let's deep dive into the agenda. As part of this series, we will look into the why and purpose of automation, some stories that have leveraged automation, the components or the layers of automation, and some terminologies. We will end by looking into a 100 feet overview of pipeline stages. Let's deep dive into the why, purpose, and problem addressed by mobile automation. We'll start by looking into an expert from a book, Suprap Part 1 Fundamental. Please pause the video to sink in with the idea that is shared. What it talks about is automating a repeated task can improve operational efficiency and provide an opportunity to look into other areas and thereby promoting overall growth of organization. Extending to the previous, mobile automation and pipeline uses tools and techniques to set up, test, and deploy mobile applications with minimal or no manual intervention. The problem addressed by mobile automation is to contain the increase in need of mobile application testing and deployment strategy as the number of mobile application development projects are increasing. This also provides a way to make the process much more efficient. Let us look into the first story. The team actually used or leveraged the test strategy to bring the cultural shift where after development it was mandated to run a test and it was automated right in the pipeline. And after incorporating this strategy, they were able to find early potential side effects and thereby reducing the potential slippage of issues to the end user. This is another example of automation where organization went ahead and removed the manual and tedious task of packaging and deployment by automating it, thereby reducing the repetitive overhead that individual has to go through, and also efficiently utilizing or leveraging its capability in other relevant tasks that is required. Possibilities of automations are much more than what we have seen in the stories. Let's deep dive into that. We'll look into the layers of automation. The components of the layers is divided into four: automation strategy, agent, runner, and deployment. We'll be deep diving into each of these in depth. Let's start with automation strategy. Automation strategy can be seen in two perspectives. It also is a thought process or the idea that what pipeline means for the mobile code base. And the other aspect is that it has a document where one can view what is the topology of path to production. Over a period of time, this document evolves and matures. One additional thing to call out is that every organization may not have same automation stages or steps. Therefore, this is not a standard. Rather, this would become the definition of each stage added to the automation strategy by the team. The example presented here talks about critical alert being automated to send email to a support team to provide early feedback proactively. This is an example of an automation strategy definition. In the next slide, you would see a sample automation strategy depicted in different layers. It starts from the development machine and goes through the pipeline and the monitoring of the critical alert that we narrated in the previous slide. And if we're looking at the automation strategy, would thus be able to understand what different stages are and what are the different kind of checks that is there in the mobile parts production of the chip. Agent is a piece of software that brings automation strategy to life. It can either be hosted in a machine or deployed in a cloud service. Agent typically has the user interface as well as the plugin to configure the build system and the appropriate dependency for running tests, connecting to the deployment server, or even configuring the softwares which can be leveraged to compile and build and create artifacts for the mobile application. One aspect to highlight here is that agent is not a replacement for the build system or the tools that would help to create an artifact for a mobile project. So agent is just an interface where developer can come and configure. Whatever software is required would be configured separately onto the machine. Agent would only have the definitions where you say, I have to run a test, and this is the software that you have to use, and this is the folder structure for the project that you have to run test on. It would also say the test output, which is the coverage report or the pass and fail status, should be published at this level. Agent also plays the role of providing the dashboard. Similarly, the creation of the build and the output, which is APK or IPA, which we talked in later slide, also would happen in runner. We'll talk about that next. So agent would only have the definition where the infra expert would come and configure. Okay, I have a runner. There is a tool called export. In case of Android, it is grader. We would say that run these and this script when the stage which is appropriate for build would be triggered. So that's about it. I have touched based upon runner as well. And in this slide, let's talk about runner. It's a host machine. Typically for iOS, there is a dependency where you need a Mac to build. However, in case of Android application, that's not a requirement. You can have an Android app built on a Windows machine or a Linux or even Mac. So host machine that would have the necessary softwares and would have the ability to generate build to which the agent would communicate is called the runner. An agent software also can be hosted on the runner machine. So what would happen is that the agent as well as the runner would be a single machine. However, in large projects, what typically happens is that there would be a requirement of multiple builds and the time for build would be required to be faster. And in order to enable parallel execution, there will be multiple runners. Therefore, agents are installed separately, but for a small scale project is where both agent as well as runner might be a single machine. And even if a developer wants to replicate the the entire pipeline in the system or development machine, a similar setup where agent could be configured in the developer machine and the development machine acting as runner could be achieved. Just to reiterate the constructs, agent and runner, typically there would be confusing interpretation of these, right? I just wanted to highlight the difference. Agent is the software, runner is the hardware. Agent is for configuring the stages. Example would be build tool invocation, rule for promotion, and even running test of creating the trigger to run test. would actually be done on the agent. Runner, on the other hand, would be phase where actual execution of each of these stages would happen. Deployment is the fourth layer of automation. Every stages, or at least most of the stages that we have configured, would have artifacts. These artifacts are shipped to the end consumers. End consumer can be internal or external. However, we will talk about artifacts in a later slide. Now, deployment is the layer where all these artifacts are put in a location which is accessible to the end consumer. The final application that gets deployed to the mobile app would ideally be downloaded from app stores. So, what happens in the deployment stage is that the artifact created would have to go through the validation and authentication to get it published into App Store, which later user can you know download from the App Store once the publishing process and the approval from the proprietary store has happened. Some of the tasks that happens in the deployment is maintaining the version, collating the commits, uh, and taking screenshots that need to be uploaded. And even there are certain validation that you know, the, the App Store requirement would have. Triggering these validation also comes in the deployment stage. The previous, when we talked about number, we talked about promotion from lower to higher environment. So deployment also happens where the lower environment artifacts are deployed separately, which need not be App Store because lower environment definitely will come into production. Particularly in case of mobile, there will be separate artifacts where lower environment will not be exposed to the actual end user rather only for internal office testing team or close user group. So one other aspect to highlight is that we are talking about pure mobile application, right? There could be companies that are developing libraries. Now for them, it is not the mobile application that is the output. The output is the library itself. So what happens is there will be some form of place where it will be published as a library. Along with that, documentation would also be updated based on the changes that are going to the current release. Thus, in a nutshell, deployment is a place where artifacts get published, and the key to understand is that all these four layers, the automation strategy, agent, runner, and deployment, work hand in hand. Post deployment, monitoring or looking after what happened to the production artifact. Also, somewhere comes in the deployment because the logs would be there and the alerting system would trigger some email to the support group to be proactive. We have been using the term artifact a lot. What is an artifact? Tangible outcomes within a pipeline. It either acts as an input for the subsequent stage or it will be consumed directly by the end user. We briefly touched upon the end user being internal stakeholder within organization or external user. Irrespective of what or who the end user would be, artifacts are generated for each stage. An internal stakeholder looks at report. They would look for the from a governance point of view, or they would also look from the understanding of where do we stand. Right? The other kind of internal stakeholder could be the potential beta test group or closed user group. These are individuals who would test the mobile application earlier before going to production. The second set of user, which is the actual consumer, they may not have direct access to the artifact. In the mobile world, the artifacts can only be downloaded from app stores. App stores for a B2C, it would be the proprietary app store from the respective platform, whereas B2B or a enterprise application, it could be self-hosted app store by the enterprise. The other aspects of automation is the FAQ, the release note. That would also be an invest for the consumer, which is not internal to the organization. Let's look into the examples of artifacts in mobile development. So in this slide, if you look at, we have divided it into six dimensions: build files, massaged code base, audit logs, test coverage result, screenshots, and the last one, which is library and its documentation. Build files could be IPA.apk or .app. So this depends on which environment also. For lower environment as well as the production environment, there will be multiple artifacts generated with the same extension. Test coverage output indicates the coverage that the entire code base has from a unit test or the test pyramid point of view. Screenshots could be both for release as well as particularly in mobile there are UI elements which needs to be tested. So there could be screenshot testing where we compare one screenshot with the modified screenshot so that a reference screenshot would tell if there is any changes or inadvertent issues that has been caused on the UI. The massage code base is from a point of view where if you are using libraries to generate code, what would or for the fact that if your code base is very large, if you are trying to manage any dependency or if you want to pull third-party libraries, what would happen is that there will be a stage where you would try to set up the code base. So the artifact of that particular stage would be a massage code base which have all the dependency and ready to be compiled and deployed. The possibility of automation in audit log was explained previously, where we would look at the logs and if there are any critical failures or some pattern that could be potentially disrupting the experience of mobile application, would be sent as a note to the support team and they could take a proactive action to correct them. Lastly, the library and its documentation, right? So every organization, the outcome may not be the mobile app. So there are organizations which provides client library in order to connect to their services. So in such case, the pipeline would be written to generate the library artifact that gets published to a location where the documentation also can be accessed, and the end consumer you know would use that as a dependency in their project. So as part of the artifact, it would be dot framework or dot AAR file in case of iOS and Android. Till now, we have covered the constructs that is required to understand mobile infra. Now, we will try to look at a 100 feet overview of the pipeline stages. The intent is to understand pipeline topology and use this knowledge to define an automation strategy. The stages that is shown in the further slide is not mandatory. Rather, based on the context of the project, you would be able to decide and define what is appropriate for your project. We'll start with the first stage, setup software dependency. This stage involves setting up the utilities required for subsequent stages. For example, the project uses CocoaPods, and CocoaPod is a dependency manager for iOS. Installing CocoaPod could be one of the tasks or item in the stage. So in Runner, what happens is that running every time these things is time consuming. For every commit, if we tend to run this pipeline, it might not be efficient to run this all the time. Therefore, some means of persisting this would be a strategy. The other aspect is that installing the build system that is required to generate the artifact. This also comes under this stage. Now, if you are going with a cloud provider, right, if you are not self-hosting a runner, all these steps might not be required because cloud provider would give a runner with these setup already provisioned. That's about the first stage. In the right side, there is a highlighted block diagram where setup software dependency is the first stage, and the arrow mark which shows the progression of each stage. The the dim part will be looked upon in the next slide. Let's move on to the next stage. Next stage is code checkout. As the name suggests, this is more towards checking out the code from the source control. If there is certain rules from a commit point of view or from a branch point of view, those also would be configured. I just wanted to add one more aspect, right? Where is or what is the trigger for this start of the pipeline? So it will be configured as a commit, or it could be, let's say, for production, nightly builds or whatever the periodic nature of the release would be. So these are also some of the aspects that gets configured as part of the stage, which is before the setup dependency. So these are more like rules, right? Now let's move on to the next stage, setup platform dependency. After checking out the code, the next stage is the fetching of dependency that is relevant to the code base. Typically, the third-party dependencies or massaging of code base would not be committed to the repository. It will be maintained elsewhere as artifactory, and this stage would be the place where all these would be fetched. After the setup platform dependency, the code will be ready with the libraries and the third-party SDK that powers the functionality of the mobile application. Let's move on to the next stage. Setup project dependency. Bear in mind, the previous stage was setup platform dependency. Now the next stage is set up project dependency. The difference in here is that every project have API keys, secrets, and in case of mobile, you have to sign in with certificates. There is also unique identifier, which is called bundle identifier. Now, we said there are different environments, and for each environment, there are different artifacts. So potentially, there is a chance that bundle identifier, the certificates, could be different. Now, this stage, setup project dependency, would be the stage where these project dependency, which is certificates, API key, and the endpoint URL to which the backend should be pointed to. All these will be fetched and configured into the code base. From this stage onwards, there will be clear bifurcations for different environment to which we would be deploying the application. Now, the the two stages, like setup package dependency and setup project dependency. The question would be, why do you want two different stages? Can all these be done together? Ideally, how do you implement those stages is totally a design choice based on the context of your project. But from a responsibility perspective, package or setup package dependency is more towards setting up the project libraries. And the latter, setup project dependency, would be to set up those items that would be bundled together along with the application and becomes one artifact that gets deployed. And these items could potentially be a configuration that is externalized and that determines the behavior for different environments. Particularly secrets, right? From a security point of view, secrets never get committed to the source control because if the secrets gets leaked, there could be potential attack surface where a malicious intended intruder can use the secret to access the internal organization system. So pipeline also has a provision, something called vault, where the secret will be stored in an encrypted format, and during build time, it will be fetched and bundled to the package that we have generated. This happens in the setup project dependency stage. Now that our code base is ready, the next stage would be to validate the sanity of the code base. Now, there are different complexities or the scope of testing is different for different projects. So, internally, what all tests we would run here also vary from project to project. But at a high level, at this stage, most likely it would be the static analysis of the code base and the unit test case. Accuracy and functioning of features, as well as the sanity of the code, can be validated by running the unit test and static code analysis on a single environment. As we change the environment, it is only the configuration that gets changed. Therefore, writing automation test only to validate that configuration change will be enough for different environments. But what happens here is that the test that we call as pre-built would be the initial level of test that would say the code base that we are ready to take a build is clean or it doesn't have much side effect. Any failure occurring in each of the stages would mean that there is a pipeline failure. The subsequent stages may not be executed and the entire pipeline would stop. There would be some alerting mechanism to the red team that could also be configured during this. The next stage is version and build number update. So in mobile, these two parameters are very essential because this also is an app store requirement where the version number signifies what is the app version from an app store point of view, and build number is more towards the in this version number how many build has been released. In a proprietary app store, once you release the application and make it available for public, you will not be able to submit another app with the same version number. However, if it is before a stage where it is available to public in a beta testing stage, you may be able to submit with same version number. However, in this case, the build number should be incremented. So that's the relationship between version number and build number. So managing this manually is a tedious task. In a large project, there could be weekly 10 to 12 builds, depending on the number of features that has been connected, you know, the back and forth between QA and the dev. So all these would lead to many builds. So having this as an automated strategy would reduce the pain during the build process. Know that all the setup are done from a dependency perspective, from different environment perspective, and even the App Store perspective where we have updated the build and version number. We would start the compile and build process. Compilation is more towards compiling the code that you're writing, and build would be from a packaging perspective, which includes signing the application. We said that there are multiple environments, and for lower environment, there are two kinds of builds. One is where you can test it on the device, and given the cost of the device, some teams might say to test the functionality on simulator. So these are the two ways that could potentially be generated for lower environment. Whereas for production environment, it would be one single build, which will be deployed to the App Store. In each of these cases, there should be separate compilation and build that is required. The internals of this could be larger than the scope that we intend to speak in this session, but the hardware architecture is the cost for them. So there will be multiple parallel execution. Can this be sequential? Yes. But I think the idea here is that it doesn't matter which environment is built first. So parallelly building would save the time. We also talked about promotion strategy. Now, a dev would test it in the lower environment, and a QA would test and verify if things are working fine in the QA environment. And from there, they would give a go ahead and a green signal to say QA environment works fine. That would be a check mark for the production artifact to be released. So these kinds of rules also get configured at this stage. In certain organizations, there might be, control on who has access to production environment. So the infra engineer also has the responsibility to define the roles who can access or approve if the lower environment artifact is ready and the production environment artifact can be shipped to the app store. So the key here is that in such an event, the further steps of deployment would only be enabled when the rule is satisfied. But if you don't have any rule, it will go as planned sequentially. So deployment becomes manual one-click activity in this case. Again, when we talk about automation, the need for having a manual task is a choice for the organization. Particularly in mobile, there is a UI element where some form of field or testing would be done by a closed user group. So this is where the approval of publishing would be coming from the closed user group, and organization may decide let's have a manual process where only after this closed user group gives the green signal will deploy. As the compile and build stage is over, the artifact for different environment could be created. Further to that, the second stage of gatekeeping kicks in. This stage typically has the steps like security testing, integration testing, dynamic analysis, etc. The second part of the stage occurs on artifact after compile and build, and it happens on each artifact for different environment. The choice again is on the organization to define what happens where. Typically, dynamic analysis would be done on the production artifact, whereas the security testing would be done on a dedicated environment. So there is this design choice that needs to be done based on the context of the project that we are working on. But in a nutshell, the key to highlight here is that this stage would be the second level of gatekeeping to ensure the artifact that we have curated is safe for deployment. The next step is deployment. Once the artifact is signed off by the relevant stakeholder, it will be published to the store. Once the approval process of the store, so for Apple or Google, there is internal mechanism where they would vet the artifact that you have submitted and would give a go ahead from their side to be released to public. And once this happens, we can enable the artifact that we have deployed to the App Store available to public. This is majorly for consumer-facing B2C application. But in case of B2B or B2E, if it is a private enterprise app store, then the control of the approval may already have happened during the previous stages. So there will not be further delay in the making it available to the end user. The key in both the cases are there are APIs which can be used to take this artifact and publish or upload to the store. That is what happens in this stage. Post this stage, once the application is available in the store, on their mobile application, they will have the user will have the notification to update or download and use it. After deployment, the app reaches the intended audience. That is where the monitoring would kick in. Monitoring is necessarily not a pipeline stage, rather, there is possibility of automation. The audit logs, the, the logs, or the observability that has been built in, and the tools that we have used to identify any crashes, all this could be leveraged to send indicators to the appropriate audience if there are any potential errors or fault that has happened on the ground. The device that we are deploying or the application gets executed is not in the control of organization. And there is a wide array of devices, and it will be impossible to test our code base on each of these. Therefore, in case of an event where there is a fault, you will be able to get feedback via this observability and automating the alert from these mechanisms and to generate some reports to to give an overview of how our application is performing on the ground. Monitoring can also be done for internal processes and operation. For example, build time failure or pipeline failure or even test failure. And this would give an indicator for the development team to take corrective course of action. Great. We have reached the end of different stages. The intent of the 100 feet overview was to give an understanding of the different responsibility that would be involved while designing a pipeline for mobile development. Starting from setting up of software dependency, code checkout, setting up of platform dependency and project dependency, running tests, updating the necessary versions and build, and creating the artifact and deploying it to the store was the crux. The post-production activity, which is monitoring, and the pre-pipeline activity, which is the gatekeeping mechanism of Git hooks, are the potential areas where we could automate. Finally, let's look into a demo. We will be looking into GitHub Action, and the idea is to reinforce the concepts that we have learned. The introduction of GitHub Action or delving into depth is definitely not this book, and the intent is to have a visual reinforcement of the concept that we have discussed here now. The Hello World project that we see is simpler. We'll try to have a pipeline that creates an Android iOS build and runs tests. So the GitHub workflow that we open, it has a configuration file. We'll open that. The GitHub action is the agent. It is hosted in cloud space, and the the configuration file, which is YAML, has the syntax which we have provided. Right now, the branch that we have to run the pipeline is being written. Then we have multiple jobs. In the job, the first one is test Android and iOS. So we have different steps in that. After that, we have build Android and build iOS. Now, the key idea here is that there will be multiple steps, and given that for each job we may have to repeat certain steps, but what the intent behind these separate jobs is to demarcate clear boundaries. So the highlight of the job has been shared right now. Pretty much that's about the job. The runner that we said, right, is marked as runs on, where Ubuntu latest has been marked for both test as well as build Android. Whereas when we go to iOS, it is marked as macOS latest. So this is where you know I wanted to bring back the concept of runner, where the actual execution of what needs to be done would happen. Let's go and see the pipeline in action. So this is already running stage for a particular commit. The test has the different steps that we have configured. Uh, Build for Android also will have similar steps where it will be like if you look at the previous slide, the build will only start after test is green. So that's one call out. And artifact creation and all those things are there. Build for iOS is red, and the reason is that code signing, all those things are not provisioned yet. So there are some dependencies that we have not added, which when resolved would be able to create a build. So that's pretty much about how a pipeline would look, and this would be similar in all the other platforms.